Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. For 37 years, the world of the bold and the beautiful has revolved around one heartbeat, one voice, one woman whose presence shaped the fabric of the show in ways that fans never fully realized until the moment the news broke. Katherine Kelly Lang, the eternal Brooke Logan, the iconic romantic heroine, the fighter, the mother, the lover, the woman who walked through fire again and again and came out stronger every time, is leaving the show, and as the cast gathered on set for her final scenes, the atmosphere shifted into something raw, sacred, and indescribably emotional, as if the studio walls themselves knew they were witnessing the end of an era that would never come again. Brooke had survived scandals, betrayals, runway showdowns, marriages, annulments, attempted murders, destiny triangles, and moments where love nearly destroyed her. Yet somehow she always rebuilt herself, always found her way back to hope, fittingly enough. But this time it wasn't a storyline threatening to take her away. This time it was Katherine, choosing to step away from the role she poured her heart and soul into for almost 4 decades. And the weight of that reality pressed on everyone who stepped into that soundstage, from the youngest background actor to the oldest crew member who remembered the day she first walked into CBS and lit up the room with a smile that instantly told the world she was meant to be Brooke Logan. The cast was warned it would be emotional, but no one expected the kind of silent grief that hung in the air as she filmed her final monologue, a speech written for Brooke but delivered with Katherine's truth flowing through every word. A goodbye that blurred the lines between fiction and reality until even the director wiped his eyes and let the cameras roll through the tears because he understood there would be no second take. Not for something this important. Not for something this real. Ridge stood opposite her, and for once it wasn't Ridge and Brooke arguing about destiny or betrayal or loyalty. It was Torsten K looking at Katherine Kelly Lang, the woman who had shaped the soul of his character before he ever stepped into the role, the woman who built half of Ridge's legacy with her own artistry, the woman he had shared countless scenes with over the years, and when she spoke the scripted line, "I think it's time for me to go," his breath hitched because he knew she wasn't just delivering dialogue. She was saying goodbye to him, to all of them, to the home she built over nearly 4 decades. The tears came, not small delicate tears but the kind that shake your shoulders and make your voice drop out mid-sentence. And it became impossible to separate actor from character, because Brooke's farewell had become Katherine's farewell. Each word a stitch being undone in the tapestry of a legacy that once seemed unbreakable. When the scene ended, there was no immediate applause. Instead, the cast rushed to her. Jacqueline MacInnes Wood, Scott Clifton, Don Diamont, John McCook, Annika Noel, Matthew Atkinson, and so many others, each holding her, crying with her, whispering memories, gratitude, and disbelief that she was truly walking away. That after all these years of battling through rewrites, plot twists, romances, heartbreaks, and moments that became TV history, she was stepping off the canvas. But perhaps the most emotional moment came when John McCook, the show's patriarch both on screen and off, approached her, unable to speak at first, his eyes glistening as he wrapped her in a long embrace, whispering, "You made this place magic." And she broke down completely because Eric Forrester had been one of Brooke's first great loves and one of Katherine's first major scene partners, a connection that had stayed strong across decades. And seeing him crumble under the weight of the moment made every person in the room realize they were witnessing the end of something that could never be replicated. She thanked him softly. She thanked all of them. She thanked the crew, calling out grips by name, makeup artists, camera operators, wardrobe stylists, writers, and everyone who had touched her world behind the scenes. And as she stood in the center of the room, the producers surprised her with a massive tribute reel projected on a screen. Brooke's first appearance in 1987. Her early chemistry with Ridge, her shocking belief storyline, the fashion showdowns, the world-famous wedding montages, the emotional breakdowns, the rooftop kissing scenes, the births of her children, her show-stopping confrontations with Taylor, her fights for love, family, and forgiveness, and moments even she had forgotten until the entire room erupted in bittersweet laughter. Katherine covered her mouth, stunned, overwhelmed, watching 3.5 decades of her life unfold in a montage that felt like a dream. And when the reel ended with the message, "Thank you, Katherine," the entire cast rose to their feet, clapping through tears, giving her the standing ovation she deserved because she had anchored this show with grace, strength, vulnerability, and a timeless presence that elevated every single storyline she touched. Even the younger cast members, some not even born when she first stepped onto the set, cried openly, recognizing that they were saying goodbye not just to a co-star but to a mentor, a pioneer, and a legend who taught them how to carry themselves in a world that demanded professionalism, endurance, and heart. The directors spoke. The executive producers spoke. Fans online flooded the show's social media pages with tributes, memories, favorite scenes, and messages of love that reached Katherine on her phone as she stood there, trying to process the magnitude of it all. Many didn't believe the rumors until the official announcement dropped, sending shockwaves through the fandom because Brooke Logan wasn't just a character. She was a cornerstone, the emotional center of the Forrester universe, and imagining the bold and the beautiful without her felt like imagining a skyline with its tallest building missing. But the farewell wasn't all sadness. It was also filled with warmth, humor, stories of pranks on set, moments Katherine carried the show during difficult seasons, and testimonies from actors whose careers she shaped simply by being generous, patient, and unwaveringly kind. When the final photo was taken, cast, crew, producers, everyone who had ever worked with her and could make it to the studio. Katherine stood in the center holding flowers, wearing the same familiar smile fans had seen for 37 years, a smile filled with gratitude, nostalgia, and the quiet pride of a woman who knows she gave everything she had to a character who became a global icon. And when she walked out of the studio through the same doors she walked through in 1987, the cast followed her outside, applauding, crying, promising to visit, promising that this wasn't goodbye forever, even though they all secretly wondered if it might be. Yet Katherine turned, waved one last time and said softly, "Brooke will always be with me and she'll always be with all of you," a sentence so beautifully bittersweet that it echoed in the hearts of everyone present, becoming the line people would repeat for years whenever they remembered the day an era ended. And as she finally got into her car, wiping her cheeks, taking one last deep breath before driving away from the place that changed her entire life, the cast stood together in silence, holding each other, knowing they had just lived through a piece of television history, the kind that would be talked about for decades. Fans watching from home didn't just lose a character. They lost a piece of themselves, a friend, a familiar force, the woman whose love stories, heartbreaks, and triumphs mirrored their own. And even though the show will go on, even though new stories will rise and new characters will step into the spotlight, the absence of Brooke Logan will linger like a soft, permanent shadow, a reminder that legends don't fade. They leave a mark so deep that the world never quite feels the same when they're gone. Even after Katherine Kelly Lang stepped off the set following her final goodbye scene, the energy inside the studio refused to settle, as if the walls themselves were buzzing with everything left unsaid, every memory that suddenly felt more fragile now that she wouldn't be here to create new ones, and the cast wandered around almost aimlessly at first, unable to fully accept that after decades of showing up, laughing through rehearsals, comforting each other through heartbreaks, both scripted and real. She was no longer just down the hall in a dressing room with her door cracked open and music playing softly as she prepared for another day as Brooke Logan. Some actors lingered on the soundstage, touching props, adjusting familiar set pieces. Brooke's portrait in the Forrester office, her favorite throw pillows at the Logan house, her signature wardrobe pieces that costume design kept for sentimental reasons, because letting go felt impossible. It felt too abrupt, too final. Like finishing a book that had defined their lives and realizing the last page had arrived without warning. Jacqueline McInnes would stood by Brooke's iconic dressing room door, running her fingers along the gold nameplate that had been polished and repolished over the years, tears streaming down her face, not bothering to wipe them because grief comes when it comes, messy and honest, and even though Steffi and Brooke had been rivals, warriors locked in generational battles over loyalty, family, and love, Jacqueline and Katherine had shared something deeper. A respect, a mentorship, a bond forged through long shoot days and storylines that demanded emotional vulnerability, the kind of connection that doesn't disappear just because cameras stop rolling. She whispered, "I'm going to miss you," even though Katherine was already gone, because sometimes words need to be spoken aloud to make them feel real. Nearby, Annika Noel stood completely still, clutching a script against her chest, her knuckles white, her breath shallow, as if she had lost a real mother. Because in many ways she had. Brooke wasn't just Hope's mother on screen. Katherine had been a guiding light for Annika from the moment she joined the show, showing her how to navigate an industry that can be overwhelming, teaching her to stand up for her character, to trust her instincts, to protect her emotional energy on long shooting days. Annika remembered the first time she ever shot a major breakdown scene, how terrified she felt about measuring up to the legacy of playing Brooke Logan's daughter, and how Katherine had taken her gently by the hands and said, "Feel it. Don't perform it. Feel it. If you do that, the audience will never forget you." Annika had carried those words like armor, like scripture, and now, standing alone on the deserted set, she felt the loss of the woman who gave her that wisdom like a physical ache in her chest. Scott Clifton, still wiping the last remnants of tears from his face, sat on the edge of the Forrester office desk, one of the most used sets for Brooke and Liam's countless mother-son heart-to-hearts, and he stared at the empty chair where Katherine had delivered so many raw, gripping monologues over the years. He whispered, "It's never going to be the same," and the truth of that settled around him like dust in a room that hadn't been touched in years. The executive producers, meanwhile, gathered in a quiet huddle near the director's monitors, speaking softly, some of them choked up, some trying to maintain professional composure, but even they couldn't hide the devastation of losing the woman who had shaped so much of the show's identity. One of them said, "This is the biggest goodbye this show has ever had, bigger than any storyline, bigger than any wedding, bigger than any explosion or cliffhanger," and his voice cracked mid-sentence because he knew he wasn't exaggerating. Katherine wasn't just another cast member, she was the show's beating heart. And now that heart was stepping away. He stared at the blank monitor still glowing from the final take and whispered, "How do you write around a missing sun?" Because that was what they were facing now, a world without its brightest center. In the wardrobe department across the hall, designers moved quietly around racks of clothing, pausing at pieces labeled with Brooke in bold white lettering. There was her signature white dress that fans adored, the beaded gown she wore during the show's most iconic weddings, the silk robe she slipped on during emotional confession scenes, the power blazer she donned when Brooke Logan was ready to fight for her family or her company. A senior costume designer, someone who had worked with Katherine for years, carefully touched each fabric as if saying goodbye to memories stitched into every hem. She whispered, "We made these for her. Only her." Another stylist said, "Nothing will ever fit the same without her spirit." They hung everything back in place, but the room felt emptier, colder, quieter in a way no redesign could fix. Katherine's presence had filled it with warmth. Now, even with the lights on, the space felt dimmer. Meanwhile, outside the studio, the world was exploding with reactions. Fans across social media were spiraling into heartbreak, disbelief, denial, anger, gratitude. Every emotion possible colliding into the kind of global shockwave only a legend could cause. Hashtags began trending instantly. Fans from every corner of the world posted tribute videos, favorite clip compilations, heartfelt messages, artwork, and lengthy threads about what Brooke Logan meant to them personally. Some fans wrote that they grew up watching Brooke as a young mother and felt inspired by her strength. Others said they watched the show with their grandparents who had since passed, and Brooke's storylines kept them connected to memories of those they loved. One woman's post went viral when she wrote, "Brooke Logan taught me to never give up on myself, no matter how many times life knocks me down. Thank you, Katherine." Thousands reposted it, adding their own testimonies. The fandom didn't just admire Katherine, they adored her fiercely, endlessly, in a way that no other character, not even Ridge or Taylor or Steffi, had ever quite captured. In the writer's room, a silence fell over the team that usually buzzed with energy. Storyboards lined the walls, arcs charted for months ahead, scripts filled with scenes that once included Brooke but now had to be reimagined, rewritten, or scrapped entirely. One writer quietly erased Brooke from several upcoming scene notes, her hand shaking slightly, because removing Katherine's character felt like erasing part of history. Another writer said, "We can't lose who she was. Even if she's gone, her shadow should stay." And the room nodded, understanding that Brooke Logan would remain a spiritual presence in the story long after Katherine left. Not just because she deserved it, but because the show simply wouldn't function without acknowledging her legacy. Meanwhile, deep inside the quiet dressing rooms, some cast members lingered even after filming wrapped for the day, unwilling to leave because the building still held traces of Katherine, her laughter echoing down the hallway, her perfume lightly lingering near her mirror, her handwritten notes tucked into drawers and taped to walls. Don Diamont, Bill Spencer himself, sat in his dressing room scrolling through old behind-the-scenes photos of him and Katherine on his phone, scenes at Monte Carlo, romantic story arcs, moments when the two of them couldn't stop laughing during bloopers. Bill and Brooke had been one of the show's most complex and addictive couples, a dynamic filled with fire and passion, but Dawn and Katherine had formed a deep off-screen friendship. Now he stared at the photos, occasionally chuckling, occasionally wiping a tear away with the back of his hand. He whispered, "She made everything better." And it wasn't an exaggeration. Every actor had a similar story. Torsten K., still shaken from filming that final goodbye scene, stepped into the dim hallway and walked down it slowly, running his hand along the wall where framed photos of cast members hung in chronological order. He stopped at a black and white photo of Katherine from her first years on the show, a young, vibrant actress with bright eyes and an innocence that made Brooke Logan instantly captivating. Torsten stared at it, imagining the 1987 version of her walking into this very building for the first time, completely unaware that she would go on to create one of the most iconic characters in television history. He whispered, "You did it, Katherine. You did all of it." And for a moment, he let himself feel the full heaviness of losing her, not as Ridge losing Brooke, but as a man losing a creative partner who understood him in ways only years of shared scenes could produce. Later that evening, the cast and crew gathered in Studio 31, where the producers had arranged a private farewell reception, a celebration, a memorial, an emotional send-off all wrapped into one. At first, the room held an awkward stillness, as if everyone was bracing themselves, but when Katherine walked in, having come back to join them for the event, the room erupted into applause, long, loud, deafening applause that lasted far beyond what she expected. She stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, overwhelmed, tears spontaneously filling her eyes, and she pressed her hand to her heart in disbelief. So many people. So much love. There were speeches, long ones, funny ones, emotional ones. John McCook took the microphone first, telling stories from the early years, stories fans never heard, like the time Katherine almost fainted during a wedding scene because the dress weighed more than 30 pounds, or the time she broke a heel right before a major catfight sequence and still delivered her lines flawlessly while leaning on a prop table for balance. Everyone laughed, then cried, then laughed again because that's what good goodbyes feel like, uneven, unpredictable, overwhelming. Jacqueline spoke next, sharing how Katherine helped her through her first ever media tour, teaching her how to stand tall through criticism, how to handle pressure, and how to protect herself from online negativity. Annika followed, her voice trembling, admitting how Katherine's gentle reassurances had saved her more times than she could count. Scott Clifton performed a dramatic reading of some of Brooke's wildest lines, making the room erupt into laughter, and then, without warning, he shifted into a slow, emotional reflection that made even the strongest cast members sniff back tears. Finally, it was Katherine's turn. The room fell silent, so silent that even the hum of the overhead studio lights seemed to dim out of respect. She held the microphone with both hands, steadying herself, looking around at faces she'd grown up with, grown older with, faces who had witnessed her triumphs and heartbreaks on screen and off. She began with a shaky breath, her voice soft but full of truth. "I don't know how to say goodbye to something that has been my entire adult life." And that was it, the sentence that broke everyone. Tears spilled instantly. Even the camera operators cried. She spoke for nearly 20 minutes, each word poetic, heartfelt, honest. She talked about the fans, thanking them for loving Brooke, even when the storylines pushed boundaries. She talked about her children, who grew up visiting her at CBS. She talked about gratitude, endless gratitude, for the writers, producers, crew, and her castmates who became family. She said, "This show made me who I am. And Brooke is a part of my soul. She always will be." Then she ended with one final line that people would quote for decades. "This isn't goodbye. It's just the end of a chapter one was blessed to write." The room exploded into applause again. Loud, raw, emotional applause that felt like thunder cracking open a sky. Flowers were presented. Gifts were exchanged. Hugs were long and lingering. Laughter and tears blended into something beautiful. An atmosphere of bittersweet celebration. When the night ended and Katherine walked out of CBS for the last time, she paused under the soft glow of the studio lights outside the building. She closed her eyes, breathed in one last time and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, but to the universe, to the journey, to the version of herself who walked into this dream all those years ago. And with that, she stepped into the next chapter of her life, leaving behind a legacy so powerful, so unforgettable, so deeply woven into the DNA of the bold and the beautiful, that her absence would echo through every storyline, every character arc, every fan memory for generations. Because Katherine Kelly Lang wasn't just part of the show. She was the show.